I should have known the world was shifting again the moment the morning felt too quiet to trust. The kind of quiet that settles on a house, not because it's peaceful, but because it's preparing to hold a truth you're not ready to open. I was in my little kitchen, the one with the chipped blue cupboards and the window that fogs up even when the stove is cold. The kettle had just started its soft complaint. That slow, bubbling sound that always reminded me of my husband humming under his breath. I reached for 2 mugs like I always used to do, and then remembered there was only me now, so I put one mug back. Let the other sit in my hand a little longer than necessary. That's when I heard the mail slot, just a soft metal click. Nothing dramatic, but my body reacted before my mind did. I stopped breathing. Something inside me whispered, "Here it comes." Funny how your bones learn to sense grief long before your eyes do. I walked slowly to the door, heart ticking like something winding down. Lying on the mat was an envelope that didn't belong to my world. Thick cream paper. A wax seal pressed so confidently it practically smirked at me. My name written in long, expensive strokes. It wasn't my son's handwriting. I didn't open it at first. I just held it, the way you hold an object that's about to change the temperature of your life. The wax seal was cold, the kind of cold that feels personal. I broke it open with the back of my thumbnail and slipped the letter free. It took only one line for the room to tilt. At the request of the couple, you are not invited to attend the wedding. No apology, no explanation. Just a sentence, sharp as the corner of a photograph. I read it again, slower this time, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something kind. They didn't. Below it was their names, my son's written first, hers floating beneath like a signature, that had suddenly become more important than the woman who raised him. My hands didn't shake. I've known worse earthquakes than this, but something inside my chest folded in on itself, soft and small, like a bird tucking its wings in a storm. I walked back to the kitchen. The letter's weight ridiculous in my fingers. Set it on the table, stared at it like it might apologize on its own. My tea steeped too long. I didn't drink it. I just sat. The house felt different. Not emptiness I was used to. More like it had turned its back on me. Jordan hadn't sent the letter himself. I could see that. I could smell her on it, her perfume, her pride, her neat little lines dividing the world into things worth keeping and things that ruined the photographs. I suppose I had fallen into the second category. I didn't call him. I didn't beg or demand. Silence has a way of holding its shape, and mine held perfectly. Later that evening, my daughter Nina let herself in like she always did, announcing her arrival with stomping boots and a laugh that used to be louder when she was little. She smelled of rain and cheap eyeliner, the kind she refused to stop wearing even at 38. She saw the letter before I could tuck it away, picked it up. "Read it." Her face changed. "Is this a joke?" she asked, voice slicing through the room. "No," I said quietly. Her jaw clenched. That anger of hers, the kind she inherited from me but never learned to tame, lit up like a match. "She banned you from your own son's wedding because what, your hands aren't manicured enough for her photos?" "It doesn't matter," I murmured. "It matters to me." I folded the letter once, then again, slid it into the drawer where I kept rubber bands and menus I'd never order from. Nina watched me like I'd just put away a burning coal. "You're really not going to do anything?" she whispered. "I already did," I said, and that was all I gave her. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a seed. Sometimes it's a memory with teeth. That night, when the house settled into its bones and the stars came out crooked over the oak tree, I went into the study. That room had held more versions of me than I could count: mother, wife, widow, woman trying not to drown. My husband's books lined the walls, their spines cracked and soft from years of being read by hands that loved them too tenderly. I knelt by the filing cabinet. The bottom drawer stuck like always. I pulled harder, the metal scraping like old grudges. Inside, beneath tax papers and fading photographs, was a folder tied in twine. The property deed to Hazelwood Grove, a place no one remembered but me. It wasn't a grand estate, not like the one Celeste posted on her perfect little internet life. Hazelwood Grove was old, weathered, covered in ivy that refused to listen to anybody. The house leaned in places. The barn sagged. The well out back had long gone dry, but it was mine. More importantly, it was still in my name. I held the papers, tracing the edges with fingers that had once stitched hems and wiped tears and held babies that needed more than I ever had. I remembered Jordan toddling through the apple orchard there. Remembered Nina chasing him barefoot in the summers. Remembered my husband carving our initials into the porch railing because he said love needed a place to stand. Hazelwood Grove was the one thing I never put up for sale. I couldn't let go of it. Not even when the bank said it was taking up space. Not even when the roof started leaking and the windows whined. And now, suddenly, it had purpose again. The next morning, the sky was the soft gray of old photographs. I called the man who used to own the land next door Mr. Handley. He was in his 80s now. Voice thick as winter wool. "You want the place fixed up?" he asked. "Yes." "By when?" "Before the wedding." He whistled, low and long. "So, a statement." I didn't deny it. "I'll get the boys," he said, "and don't worry, your name stays on every invoice." For the next week, the Grove came alive again. Paint stripped, windows replaced, lights rewired, the chapel rebuilt. Oh, yes, the chapel. The one my husband and I had once renewed our vows in under flickering candlelight. While our children slept in the car outside, it glowed now, quiet, patient, waiting. The day before the wedding, I stood at the edge of the property, hands in my coat pockets. There was no war in my chest, no rage, just the steady rhythm of a woman who had learned how to bury the unnecessary and water the important. Cars. Eventually came celery green vans, glossy white sedans full of flowers and perfectly curated dreams. The wedding planners looked confused when they arrived at the main road and found the gates closed. Hazelwood Grove was private property, after all, and the person with the keys wasn't her. People argued, phones rang, decisions scrambled, but land listens only to those who own it, and that day it listened to me. I didn't stop the wedding, I just displaced it, moved it like a painting that had hung on the wrong wall for too long in the end. Celeste found a hall in town, sterile, bright, ugly in the way only rushed decisions can be. People showed up late, decorations looked tired, vows echoed off metal chairs. Jordan didn't smile. I watched from the hill, didn't attend, didn't intrude, just stood under the old sycamore tree at the Grove and felt gravity shift back into its rightful place. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea that had finally cooled enough to drink. Nina joined me, hands shoved deep in her pockets. "What did you do?" she asked. "Nothing loud." She laughed softly. "So that's what silence means to you?" "No," I said, "that's what remembering means." She sat beside me and laid her head against my shoulder, like she hadn't done since she was a girl, afraid of thunderstorms. "Do you think he'll come back?" "I don't know," I said truthfully, "but today he learned who I am." The moon leaned low over the Grove, lighting the chapel windows like lanterns. The roses, my husband's roses, bloomed defiantly, even in the chill. And for the first time in months, maybe years, my house did not feel too small for me. It felt like a place still capable of holding something warm, maybe even a little joy. I closed my eyes and let the night settle around me, quiet but not empty, heavy but not cruel. And in that space between breath and memory, I realized something I'd been too wounded to say out loud. You can't erase a mother. Not with paper. Not with silence. Not with a wedding she isn't invited to. Some roots go deeper than shame. Some names don't disappear when you stop saying them. And some women like me, too late and too well, that love can bend, break, snap into. But dignity grows back stronger. Even after a storm. I didn't sleep much the night after the wedding. Sleep had a way of slipping through my fingers these days anyway, like silk that refused to stay folded. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks that looked like the lines of an old map. Places I'd been, places I couldn't go back to, moments I'd lost without meaning to. The house creaked around me, old wood, old bones, old memories rearranging themselves like restless ghosts. Somewhere near the back window, the wind rattled the loose hinge my husband always meant to fix. He had a habit of promising repairs and then getting pulled into other things, dancing with me in the living room, taking the kids to the lake, fixing a chicken coop for a neighbor he barely knew. It used to annoy me. Now it felt like a tenderness I didn't earn properly when he was alive. I closed my eyes and saw the wedding hall again. That cold place where my son said vows without looking fully present in his own skin. I hadn't stood close enough to hear the words. I didn't need to. Some moments speak their truth, even from miles away. Before dawn, I rose, pulled my robe tight around me. The air in the kitchen had that pre-morning chill, quiet, raw, full of unspoken things. I made tea the way he taught me, with the spoon slowly circling the cup like I was stirring the day into existence. "I found it," he said quietly, "in storage." My breath caught. I knew that box. I recognized the faded marker on the lid, the ink barely clinging to the letters after all this time. "Mom, keep safe." My husband had written that, his script strong but slightly uneven at the end where the illness had begun to show. I hadn't seen it in a decade. Jordan watched me, his shoulders tight, as if bracing for something he didn't know how to name. "Open it," he said. I did. Carefully. The lid lifted with a soft sigh. Like the box itself remembered it wasn't supposed to be forgotten. Inside were tiny pieces of my life. A photo of us on the lake, Jordan perched on his father's shoulders, laughter frozen midair. The charm bracelet he'd bought me for our 10th anniversary, each charm representing a memory we promised to keep safe. A dried flower from the day Nina graduated, a ticket stub from a movie I'd taken the children to when money was tight and imagination was the only currency we truly owned. At the bottom lay a folded paper, old, yellowed at the edges. My husband's handwriting. I felt Jordan's breath hitch as I reached for it. He'd read it, I could tell. The way his eyes darted from my hands to my face told me the truth before I even unfolded the note. It was short. If anything happens to me, take care of them. And if they forget you one day, remind them gently. They'll come back. People always return to the hands that built them. My fingers trembled. Not with grief, I'd cried those tears years ago, but with something else. Recognition, reassurance. A reminder I didn't know I still needed. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jordan whispered. "I'm so sorry I forgot." "You didn't forget," I said softly. "You just misplaced the truth for a while." He covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook once, then twice. A quiet surrender of everything he'd held too tightly. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his arm. Old instinct. Old muscle memory. "We have time," I said. He nodded, breath unsteady. "I don't deserve it." "No one deserves grace," I replied. "That's what makes it grace." He stayed late that night, long after the tea grew cold and the cicadas outside fell silent. He rested his head on the table, eyes closed, like a boy who finally felt safe enough to sleep. I watched him. This man I raised. This man I lost. This man who found his way back, not because I demanded it, but because truth has a way of tugging at the seams until something opens. When he left, he hugged me differently. Not awkward, not tense, just human, real, present. It didn't fix everything, but it fixed something, and that was enough to begin again. The next few weeks felt like dawn. Soft, gradual, golden in places you don't expect. Jordan came by almost daily, sometimes with takeout, sometimes with fresh bread, sometimes with nothing but his tired eyes and a quiet willingness to sit in my presence. He told me he'd moved out of the apartment he shared with her, said he needed space, said the silence in that place had gotten too loud. He didn't mention her name. He didn't have to. We grew used to each other again, like two people relearning a familiar dance. One step forward, one step pause, one step steady. Nina came over more, too. Her anger had softened into something gentler, something patient. She and her brother spoke in low voices on the porch sometimes. I didn't eavesdrop. Some conversations belonged to children trying to climb their own mountains without a parent watching. One evening, after they left together to grab dinner, something they hadn't done in years, I sat alone on the porch. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in shades of orange and memory. The roses along the fence had bloomed unexpectedly out of season, stubborn in their insistence to show beauty in the wrong month. I took it as a sign. From the house, from the land, from the woman I used to be. Healing doesn't wait for calendars. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. Not a cruel one, not a rejection wrapped in politeness. This envelope was plain, handwritten, smaller than the ones that carried pain. From Hazelwood Grove. I opened it carefully. It wasn't a bill, or a warning, or a question. It was a deed, transferred, finalized, notarized. My name, my husband's. The date we first walked the property. And now, the date it returned. I was alone in the kitchen when I read it. The sunlight through the window warmed the paper, my hands, my chest. I hadn't gone looking for revenge, not fully, not in the way movies write it. I'd just gone looking for a place where my voice couldn't be erased, a place where my roots ran deeper than someone else's ambition. Now the land where my children grew, laughed, cried, built dreams and buried others. That land belonged to me again, and with it, the power to decide what story it would tell next. That night, I lit a candle in the living room and sat in the dim glow, letting the flame flicker its small truth. The house hummed around me, old wood settling in ways that sounded almost like breath. The world outside moved quietly, as if giving me space to take this in. Through the window, I saw the streetlight casting long, soft shadows against the garden gate. shadows that looked like outstretched hands. Begin again, they seemed to whisper. 2 days later, I drove to Hazelwood Grove at dawn. The air was crisp, the sky tinged with lavender, the grass still wet. I unlocked the gate and stepped inside the property slowly, reverently, as if entering a cathedral made of earth and memory. The chapel stood quiet in the morning light, empty now, waiting. I walked inside, letting the door close softly behind me. The stained glass glowed faintly, catching the first rays of the sun. Dust spiraled in the air like tiny galaxies. The silence felt different this time, not abandoned, not expectant, but open. I sat in the front pew. The wood held the warmth of 1,000 stories, including mine. I closed my eyes, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, soft, hesitant. Jordan. He approached slowly, like a man approaching something sacred. He sat beside me, his breath visible in the cool air. I got your message, he said quietly. I didn't send one. He smiled faintly. Nina did. Ah. He rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring ahead at the empty altar. It's beautiful here, he murmured. Yes, it always was. We sat for a long time, the quiet stretching comfortably between us. Eventually, he spoke again. I want to help, he said, with whatever you plan to do here. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you think I'm planning? He hesitated. I don't know, but I want to be part of it. I looked at him, really looked, the man he'd become, the child he'd been, the stranger that lived in the gap between those two selves. Why now? I asked gently. He swallowed, because I finally realized something. What's that? He turned to me, eyes steady. You didn't lock the doors to punish me. You locked them to save something I threw away. The truth of that settled around us like soft ash, and, he added, because you're still my mother. The words hit me like a warm wind, soft, strong, unexpected. I felt something inside me loosen, something that had been tied too tight for too long. I placed my hand over his. Then let's build something, I said, not revenge, not a lesson, a beginning. We walked the property together, past the orchard, past the chapel, past the old swing with its frayed rope. Jordan touched the swing lightly, a ghost of a smile on his lips. I want to fix this, he said. I nodded. Then fix it. The sun rose higher. The air warmed, and for the first time in months, the land didn't feel haunted by what didn't happen. It felt ready for what could. We decided that day without saying it out loud, that Hazelwood Grove wouldn't be a wedding venue anymore, or a monument to pain, or a stage for someone else's fragile perfection. It would be something gentler, something with room for growth, something with room for the lost. Over the next weeks, we worked cleaning, clearing, repairing. Nina came often, bringing tools and snacks and the occasional sarcastic comment that made us laugh when exhaustion made everything funnier. We opened the chapel doors wide. Let the air travel through. Let the dust dance where it wanted. Let the space breathe again. The neighbors asked what we were doing. We told them, eventually. Not in a speech. Not with a grand announcement. Truth doesn't need trumpets. It just needs honesty. Hazelwood Grove became a refuge. Not for weddings, for women. For people who needed quiet. For people who needed healing. For people who had been abandoned in ways too subtle to see but too deep to ignore. We created a community space. A reading room. A workshop corner. A small garden where people could plant something and watch it grow even when life refused to give them roots elsewhere. The first woman who came was shy. Eyes downcast. Fingers fidgeting with the zipper of her coat. She said she heard we offered a place to sit and think. We did. The second came with a notebook, so worn the pages curled like dried leaves. She asked if she could write in the chapel, said the silence there felt honest. We said yes. The third came because she had nowhere else to go after her husband left. She sat under the sycamore for 3 hours and cried without apology. And when she stood up, she said the tree felt like it was listening. People started calling it the Grove House. The name stuck. Jordan helped build shelves, repaired pews, restored the old swing. He worked quietly, like a man repairing not just wood, but something inside himself. Nina organized workshops, painted signs, coordinated donations. She joked that she was the project manager of a miracle. And me, I was simply here, present, brooded. Alive, in a way I hadn't felt since my husband died. By the time Nina arrived, the cup had gone cold. She let herself in, breathless from rushing. She always rushed, even when she didn't need to. You're up, she said, voice soft. Couldn't sleep. She hung her coat on the hook and sat across from me. fingers drumming the table in a rhythm I knew to Wellinger she hadn't figured out how to use yet. "You didn't go to the ceremony," she said. "No," I replied. "Good." Her eyes searched mine. She was waiting for me to blame her brother, to curse him, to lay my heartbreak bare so she could help carry it like she used to carry her dolls, carefully, tenderly, the wrong way around. But anger felt too small for the size of the ache inside me. "He got married," I said, voice steady, "and I wasn't there." She swallowed. "He didn't deserve you there, not after that letter." I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window. The sky was pale, like someone had washed it too many times. The garden was still wet with dew, the kind that settles on the roses and glows like glass when the sun hits. "He'll come," she said suddenly, as if the certainty had just burst through her. "One day, he'll come." "I'm not waiting," I said, "but I'm not locking the door either." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're kinder than they deserve. I'm older than they understand." She laughed once, a small puff of disbelief. "You scare me sometimes, Mama." "No," I said quietly. "I don't scare you. I just remind you of things you're not ready to see." She leaned back, crossed her arms, and sighed heavily. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but something's shifting." She didn't like that. Nina hated shifts. She wanted straight lines, predictable routines, endings she could measure. But life had never been that polite with me. Later that afternoon, when the sun finally found its courage, I drove to Hazelwood Grove. The road leading to the property was lined with trees shedding their last stubborn leaves. The wind pushed them across the asphalt like tiny regrets. The gate opened easily, my key slid in without resistance. Funny how things that should fight you sometimes give in with alarming grace. The grove looked different in daylight. Not haunting, not victorious, just quiet. The chapel doors were closed. The roses at the entrance were still damp from morning dew, boughs of ivory ribbon tugged loose by the wind. I walked the path slowly, letting the gravel crunch under my shoes. "That sound used to annoy Jordan when he was little," he said. "It made the earth sound tired." Inside the chapel, the air was thick with leftover fragrance, white flowers, old wood, something perfumed and artificial layered over something ancient and soft. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass, painting slow, shifting colors on the pews. I sat in the fourth row, always the fourth. That's where my husband used to sit during community gatherings here. Fourth row, right-hand side. One knee bouncing, because he could never sit still when the world was talking. The silence wrapped around me, not cruelly, not even with sadness, more like an acknowledgement. "I didn't ruin your wedding," I murmured to the empty space. "I just gave it back to the truth." A truth they didn't want. A truth they didn't invite. A truth that held more weight than any curated table, setting or monogrammed program. When I left the chapel, the wind had picked up. It tugged at the hem of my coat, like a child asking for attention. I followed the path toward the orchard. Most of the trees were bare now, but their branches still arched gracefully, remembering the shape of fruit that used to hang from them. I reached the oldest tree, the one with the rope swing my husband built, the one that creaked like an old laugh. The swing was still there, dangling crookedly, too low to hold anybody now. I touched the frayed rope. Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't ask permission. It just rises. I saw Jordan at 5 years old, pushing the swing too high. I saw Nina at 10, begging him to give her a turn. I saw myself leaning against the fence, pretending not to worry, praying the rope would hold. It always did. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The smell of damp earth filled my lungs, grounding and relentless. I didn't cry. Tears weren't the language of this moment. The moment was speaking something else, an old, ancient truth that came from women who'd lived through worse betrayals than a wedding exclusion. "You will not break. You were built for storms." When I returned home, evening had curled itself over the neighborhood. Porch lights blinked on like soft candles. The air was cooling, crisp with the promise of early winter. I made tea again, sat at the table, watched the shadows shift on the wall. Around 9, a soft knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nina would have called. Neighbors didn't drop by anymore. People these days knocked only when they needed something. And nobody needed anything from an old woman who kept too many secrets. I opened the door. It was Jordan. He stood on the porch with his tie loosened, and his hair slightly disheveled, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes, the eyes that once matched the color of the lake behind Hazelwood Grove, looked different. Older, heavy for a moment. Neither of us spoke. "Hi," he whispered. "Hello, dear." He exhaled shakily. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered slowly, like a man unsure if he still had permission to exist in this space. His gaze swept the living room, lingering on the worn armchair, the bookshelf, the framed photographs he hadn't bothered to look at in years. He sat at the kitchen table without waiting to be asked. He used to do that when he was little, walk in and take his place like he believed the chair belonged to him. Tonight, he sat like a guest who wasn't sure if he'd overstayed. I made tea again. Set his cup in front of him. He stared at the steam rising from it, fingers trembling. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't move. For which part? His throat tightened. All of it. The letter. The distance. Letting her. He stopped, pressing a palm to his face. I didn't know she sent the letter. Not until after. Did you stop her? He looked down. No. The truth sat between us like a third person, small, sharp, impossible to ignore. I should have, he whispered. I should have told her no. That you're my mother. That you deserve better. But his voice cracked. I didn't want to fight. I nodded slowly. Peace is expensive, Jordan. And you paid with the wrong currency. He flinched at that. Tears gathered in his lashes, but he didn't let them fall. I went by Hazelwood today, he said. After the ceremony, the gates were locked. Yes, you changed everything. No, I replied. I reminded it who it belonged to. He leaned back, chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. People were confused, angry. Celeste? He shook his head. She thinks you did it to humiliate her. I didn't do it for her. Then why? I looked at him reality. Looked at him, the boy I held through fevers. The teenager who slammed doors. The man who drifted away like fog burning off in the sun. Because you forgot where your roots were, I said gently. And sometimes the land has to remind you. A tear finally fell down his cheek. He didn't wipe it. He just stared at me, wounded and wide-eyed. Like a child who had finally run out of excuses. Mama, he whispered, voice trembling, I don't know who I am anymore. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. That, I said, is a good place to start? He cried then, softly, quietly, the way grown men cry when they've spent too long pretending they're not breakable. I let him cry. I didn't forgive him that night. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a dawn that creeps in slowly, lighting corners you didn't know were dark. But I let him stay. We talked for a long while, not about the wedding. Not about the letter. Not even about her. We talked about Hazelwood, about the orchard, about the rope swing, about the way the wind used to whistle through the sycamore leaves, like a lullaby. He left around midnight, hugged me awkwardly, like he'd forgotten the shape of me. As he stepped outside, he turned back. Can I come again tomorrow? If you'd like, I said. He nodded, eyes soft with something I hadn't seen in years. Gratitude, or maybe recognition. When I closed the door, the house didn't feel empty. It felt waiting, and I stood in the quiet, letting the weight of the day settle into something warm, something hopeful, something like a beginning. The days after Jordan's visit passed softly, like pages turning in a book I thought I'd finished long ago. He came again the next evening, and the evening after that, each time with a hesitance that made him look like the boy who used to knock on my bedroom door at midnight, whispering, Mom, I had a bad dream. Only now, he didn't come with nightmares. He came with silence and regret. He never said it out loud, not fully, but I could hear it in the way he exhaled when he sat at my table, in the way his eyes traveled across the room, stopping at every memory he'd abandoned, in the way he spoke my name soft now, like it was something fragile in his throat. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes he didn't bring anything at all. He would sit and talk about small things, the weather, the roadwork near his apartment, a coworker who made him laugh. It was strange how ordinary it all felt after so much hurt. Pain doesn't vanish. It just gets quieter when there's something gentler nearby. I didn't cook for him. Not at first. Kindness offered too quickly can feel like permission. Instead, I let him linger in the space between us, the one he created and now wanted to mend. He didn't rush, and I didn't either. One evening, he arrived carrying a box, a shoebox. The cardboard sagged in the middle like it had been opened and closed too many times over too many years. He set it on the table, pushed it gently toward me. What's this? I asked.